Sir, very good evening.
Good evening.
Vision India Forum welcomes you to this Amrit Mahotsav series, Amrit Kal series of excellent conversations we're having with experts, people who this nation shall be, grateful to share their experiences on subjects of their choice, expertise, relevance, and something which is going to affect the future of this country over the next 25 years when we land up in 2047, in the 100th year of independence. With respect to foreign policy, who better than Mr. Parthasarathy to speak to us? Somebody who knows the foreign policy issues, especially with respect to some countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka, by the back of his hand. Somebody who is unparalleled as far as hands-on experiences of tumultuous years that have gone past with respect to these two important nations, who are gaining significance for India's India's progress as the years go by. Sri Lanka has also become such an important destination now, especially with the Chinese also, venturing out quite, considerably into the Sri Lankan waters. And Pakistan has always been a volatile neighborhood for us. So now with that in mind, with 2047, something, a vision that the Prime Minister has termed as Amrit Kal period, 75 years completed, the Amrit Kal has started. Parthasarathy ji, your experience shall hold the entire country in good stead with respect to what are the do's and don'ts with respect to these two important nations and neighbors, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Over to you, Sri Gopal Swami Parthasarathy, former ambassador.
Well, let me start with Sri Lanka first, and my own dealings with them. They really started when the ethnic crisis between Tamils and Sinhalas was at its peak at that point in time. And I was then the information advisor to the then Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi. And while I was not meant to deal directly with foreign policy subjects, this became inevitable because really with Sri Lanka, I mean, it is a neighboring Buddhist country. People are friendly. They want to come and visit, largely Buddhist wanting to visit Bodh Gaya. The differences arose really over the ethnic issue, where the Tamil minority felt they were being discriminated against. It raised considerable passions in southern India, and we had to try and work out a solution to the ethnic issue. After prolonged negotiations, we got an agreement whereby the Sri Lankan government agreed to grant much greater autonomy to the northern and eastern Tamil-dominated areas of the country. But it didn't work, and for that I would blame primarily the Tamil leader, Velupillai Prabhakaran, who seemed determined to bring in an element and retain an element of violence. We had to intervene militarily because we were there to guarantee the security of the Tamils. And we had almost a division. It later increased to much more when we found the Sri Lankans were out, the Prabhakaran and the LTTE were out on a killing spree of the Sinhala population, which is the majority population. We could not allow that with our troops present there, and therefore it became into a pretty rugged fight, which finally gave the Sri Lankans back the authority to rule the Northeast. The Indian troops left, and the Prime Minister was killed by an LTTE terrorist. That was the price we paid then for Sri Lanka. But there was a principle to it, that, well, yes, the Tamils had some rights. India would not be a party to separatism in any neighboring country, and particularly a friendly country like Sri Lanka. That has stood the test of time. The real serious problem we faced in Sri Lanka is the growing Chinese influence. Used Chinese money to build ports, to assist in development, and then in the process took control of one port. way down south in Sri Lanka. And we had to act at that point in time. We also were getting concerned with the Chinese presence in the Colombo. So Hambantota was the port in the south, which had de facto gone under Chinese control. And we did not want Chinese warships and submarines floating right around our shores. We made it very clear to the Sri Lankans that was unacceptable. And but also we made it clear we wanted to have friendly relations. And the real opportunity came, and for this credit to Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaishankar. Jaishankar had served earlier in Sri Lanka when the earlier civil war was going on, so he knew the country. And India came in with a package which China could not match. Their economy was floundering. People were heading for rioting, starvation, and misery. When we stepped in after a visit that Jaishankar paid, and Prime Minister made a very generous offer, which is really that we would give them $4 billion, pending what they're getting assistance from the IMF and other countries. And that is really what saved democracy in that country. It was on the verge of collapse. And I think hats off to the Prime Minister and to Jaishankar for doing this and achieving this. Problems, of course, still remain. Some of our concerns about Chinese getting projects too close to our shores, the Sri Lankans have taken seriously and withheld. And we have also been now ready to match the Chinese use of the port of Colombo by setting up our own port facilities nearby for them. I think that's a project done by the one of the Indian industrial groups. And therefore, we are pretty well positioned now in Sri Lanka. China, yes, will continue to probe us. Yes, they still control the Hambantota port, but I think the Chinese themselves learned that we would take very seriously warships and submarines floating in and out. You do have the odd warship and submarine floating out, but that we can take. But we will not allow it to be used as a base. Second, we've neutralized the Chinese in the port of Colombo, which is the capital city. And the relationship goes on well because it's a democracy and we don't want to get involved in their internal affairs. We hope they will have elections soon. That seems to be a bit difficult because of the real hardship conditions people live in under right now. The foreign exchange position is still tight. As I said, we've done our job, and we've also been sort of lobbying with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to provide them assistance. So it is a nation in trouble, but a neighbor, but which has taken seriously into account the fact of our concerns. And we in turn have reciprocated by giving them generous economic assistance at a time when the country was on the verge of collapse. That's where it stands.
With respect to Pakistan, now fresh elections due, and the turmoil continues. The army keeps dictating the terms and calling the shots. Your prediction going forward, and where do you see, especially with the elections looming large over Pakistan, the state of...
Yeah. Well, you would have to be an astrologer to predict what's going to happen in Pakistan, and even astrologers would find it hazardous to pronounce what is likely to happen. Look, put bluntly, they are in a mess of their own making. They got too close to China, and let me tell you, China uses Pakistan as its main instrument to contain India. people seem to forget that China, the Pakistan's nuclear weapons and its missiles with capacities to hit any place in India from Chennai to Jammu and Kashmir, nuclear tipped, have been provided to Pakistan by China. Any Indian target of any consequence. The missiles are Pakistani. The nuclear weapons designs are are Chinese. The nuclear weapons designs also, like the missiles, are from China. So Pakistan is at the same time facing serious problems from the West. They are not too pleased with this close Chinese connection by Pakistan. Both the Trump administration and now the Biden administration have made their displeasure known to Pakistan. That is going to be a continuing factor unless Pakistan changes. But the fact of the matter is, if in Sri Lanka it is Hambantota, in Pakistan it is in Balochistan, the Chinese port. So I think where they have access, the Navy has access. So I think the Chinese presence also, they're talking of building roads across to Afghanistan from Pakistan. So I think we are going to the most serious challenge we really face in our diplomacy today, and nobody seems to take it, is not just China or Pakistan separately. It is Pakistan acting as a subservient tool of China. If the Chinese sneeze, the Pakistanis will keep quiet. But it is the Chinese who encourage or look the other way on Pakistan's support for terrorism. It is the Chinese who protect them in international organizations, especially when the Financial Action Task Force internationally imposed sanctions on Pakistan, which are now being slowly removed. Pakistan itself now is facing problems. And one of the reasons for the American anger, I think, is the humiliating way the Americans had to leave Afghanistan. With the Taliban walking in, and everybody knew that everything the Taliban had was supplied by Pakistan and the ISI. So the American anger of that remains. And therefore, the NATO countries are also pretty careful. But China continues to provide it support. But there's one thing about China. While they've got billions and trillions of dollars of foreign exchange reserves, they're very stingy in giving out foreign exchange aid to countries. It's very difficult for Pakistan has got one assignment of $1 billion or something of that order, but no large economic supply.
Sir, another issue that we need to really take forward, another issue that we need to really understand and take forward is the relevance of other neighboring countries like Nepal, Burma. Though that was not on the plate today, but then since we're talking, and opportunity to talk to you is quite rare, we need to really understand as to what are the developments in Nepal. For example, they supposedly now are a secular state, and Burma is facing a lot of internal turmoil and the Rohingya crisis, so many things. So and we also have Bangladesh. I mean, could you throw some light about on these neighboring important countries now?
In the case of Bangladesh, let us be very clear. As long as Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League rule Bangladesh, everything's fine. But nobody is eternal. And you have to remember, there is a large pro-Pakistani Islamist element in Bangladesh. So what we have to be careful is to watch out for the forthcoming elections in Bangladesh in the next couple of months. Sheikh Hasina has been solid in promoting economic aid and the other, but people do get older with the passage of time. And the main concern for us in Bangladesh is going to be how the people of Bangladesh themselves look and vote in an election. Are the radical Islamic elements going to prevail, or is Bangladesh going to carry on in its present path? If it chooses the path of being confrontational, it will get huge support from both Pakistan and China. Let's have no doubt about it. China is very keen to have naval-based facilities in the Bay of Bengal, where their ships can come in and out, even if they are not base facilities. Certainly, a pro-Chinese government will pose security issues for us. So we'll have to wait and watch. It depends on, does the sensible, moderate, sort of secular, if I may use that term, forces in the country prevail, or whether it is going to be radical Islamic countries, but we can manage. On Myanmar, since I've been ambassador there, look, they will not do anything which causes us direct harm. But you have to realize they don't like the Chinese. They've had problems with the Chinese. But because of Western sanctions, they look to China. And I think the West is being very, very short-sighted in this. I've told my American friends this, I tell it regularly. They have to learn to live with the reality that given its diversity and its ethnic conflicts, but Myanmar is, or Burma as you call it, is destined to have long periods of military rule. Now, it's not our job to tell what that country should do. As far as we are concerned, we have built a very good port called in Sitwe, where on the Bay of Bengal, where which would link our northeastern states to the sea, to the Bay of Bengal, and even to Calcutta through the Bay of Bengal. So they have been very cooperative in projects like that. Certainly, we look forward to carrying this. We have no reason to believe that the Chinese are getting any assistance to do anything on our borders from the Myanmar government. But we have to bear in mind that there are certain tribals. You have the problem now in Manipur. We have a 1,640-kilometer border with Myanmar, and it passes through northeastern states, starting from Nagaland, Manipur, and down south. So it becomes a very close, sensitive relationship. And I must say for a fact that in terms of our relations with their armed forces, we have seen to it that in private, we tell them to cool off. And I've told them, if you're going for democracy, we are always ready to help. But we are not going to preach to what sort of government they're going to have. We're not going to interfere in their internal affairs. And any humanitarian assistance which their people need is always available from us.
Finally, your take on Nepal, sir, being a secular, now being touted as a secular nation instead of a Hindu nation?
Well, let me put it somewhere. I look at Nepal as one member of the family who perhaps has gone in the wrong direction. They make the mistake of trying to play off China against India. And that does not always work. Of course, we have an open border, and we have their youngsters in our army and so on. But there are times also we need to make it clear that if we put the squeeze on them, which we have done once, it'll hurt, and that we don't want to do it.
Sir, before I end, because with you time flies, but anyways, your take on India's stand on Kashmir in the next, say, say, a few years?
Well, I'm not worried at all. Pakistan is so deeply involved and very in its own affairs. Yes, it will send a few people, Mujahideen here, there. But listen, I think, to me, coming from southern India, but living in Delhi, I spent the bulk of my life in India, in Delhi. I don't see any reason. It was a really stupid decision to have the Article 370. Why should a Kashmiri be treated better than you or me? Why should he be treated separately and better than people living in Haryana and Punjab? Just citizen of India, and that's it. So I don't mind if they are properly that in a sort of setup of being an Indian state, which is a sort of haven for tourism, they can enrich themselves, they can prosper, they can send their children all over the world. But they must also realize that Pakistan is in no position to take us on right now or in the foreseeable future.
So, discounting the Chinese factor, we are in a good position. According to you, the former ambassador, the great parthasarathy ji, Gar Zameen Firdaus, Zameen something we should be the ringing tone of our mobiles over the next few years. And Mr. Modi, in case he comes back to power in 2024, India should be well prepared to tackle China as the most important dragon looming large over us. Because if we do not tackle our foreign policy strongly enough with respect to China and play our cards well with the US and the European economies, we are definitely going to be in for big trouble. Thank you so much, former Ambassador Parthasarathy ji. This country will always remember your contribution as an ambassador to so many countries representing India's interests. And I'm sure Mr. Modi is going to take real good advice from you, including your old associate, Mr. Judge, our foreign minister, Jaishankar ji, who was working with you as your subordinate, as your colleague for some time. So I'm sure these guys will benefit a lot from your experiences. This video today will be holding us.
One little point about Jaishankar. His father was my strategic guru, K. Subramaniam. K. Subramaniam is the author and the promoter of India's nuclear weapons program that we have today.
And your father was somebody who was instrumental along with Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel to formulate the India Civil Services, which we are all proud of today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.